This is the Post Shift Podcast, a raw look at the hospitality industry. Welcome to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Shawn Soole. This week, I'm going to sit down with the very super talented, ridiculously knowledgeable must blender of Wisers, Dr. Don Livermore. Probably one of my most ultimate sit downs is with this gentleman. He is a ridiculously knowledgeable gentleman about Canadian whiskey. He's the great mind behind Lot 40 and a whole schwack load of other things. We have a good chat, a bit, albeit quick, because of how busy he is for Whiskey Fest, but I really had an opportunity to sit down with him and pick his brain about where he came from, how he got to where he is now, and how much he loves Canadian whiskey. So I hope you enjoy this episode, guys. Have a good weekend, and I will see you next week. Bye.
And you sort of ease your way into Whiskey Fest and you do a few events and stuff.
Yesterday was right from about, we start about 10 in the morning all the way to about midnight last night.
Yeah.
So I got 2 master classes today.
Yeah, and this year I heard that a lot of people came in on Friday morning and they're leaving Sunday morning. And so I was just scrambling. After this, I'm going to go up to the Jim Beam suite at Grand Pacific and just do a rotating door of people coming sitting down with me.
Yeah.
So with my podcast, I keep it breezy. I sort of start just you introducing yourself and sort of get into the nitty gritty, and then I just let you talk.
Okay,
basically
that could be dangerous
because at the end of the day, it's more about I want to see how I get people behind the brand and stuff like that. Chris shocked me yesterday when he was I was on the road with Backstreet Boys for 3 months in Canada. I'm like, what? He's I was the production manager for Backstreet Boys. I'm
oh my gosh, I didn't realize.
Excuse me, what? And so I get surprised. That surprise is good.
All right, so we probably get a hard stop, just say 10:35, 10:40.
Oh, yeah. I usually give the episodes half an hour.
Okay, yeah,
so
perfect.
It's perfect. People lose concentration after half an hour.
Yeah. We got that.
So, how about you start by just introducing yourself?
Okay. I'm Dr. Don Livermore. I'm the master blender of the Hiram Distillery. I've been at the distillery now 23 years. It's almost 24 next month.
Wow.
It's 2012. A little bit back my history, my education. I got a degree in microbiology. That's how I started in the distillery. They hired me to look after yeast. I was the guy who looked at yeast cells for many years. And then just as any other master blender, you kind of do a lot of different jobs in the distillery. So I worked in the distillery, and then I worked in R&D, and then I worked as an analytical chemist, and eventually you found your way up to the title as a master blender. So, and the company's been great for me. As you know, I went to school, did my master's of science in brewing and distilling at Harriet-Watt University. Finished that in 2004, and then I finished and completed my PhD in brewing and distilling in 2012.
How many people have PhDs in the PhD in the brewing and distilling?
There's a number of them. They usually stick to beer though, or education, right?
Okay.
Very few of us get inside of the distilling side of it. I only know Bill Lumsden is the other guy that has their PhD.
What drew you to What drew you to Wisers? What drew you to Hiram Walker? What drew you to
luck?
Oh, really?
Luck. I graduated as a microbiologist back in the 90s. I did a lot of the biotechnology degrees and rearranging DNA. I intended to make drugs for it. Well, a lot of your antibiotics and things like that are made by microorganisms and fermenting and stuff. And there was a real need for people. I interviewed at drug companies, and I just never could land a job. And then I had a friend say, "Hey, you know what? They're hiring a microbiologist at this whiskey distillery. Why don't you apply?" Applied and moved to Windsor, and I've stayed there for almost 24 years now.
Wow! So you gave up one drug for another?
Yeah. Well, I got drugs, alcohol. I got both covered, right?
So really, just luck in 24 years. So how are you seeing Canadian whiskey change in that 24 years?
I think a lot of it's probably now stuff like this, the social media and computer. When I started, there wasn't even a computer.
Oh yeah.
We were doing handwritten notes and internal memos, and they had a mailman going around our distillery. That's how they delivered things. And eventually, I think computers and transparency, the previous blenders or research and development people would never say a thing about your brand. It was all top secret. It was all secretive. Today, as you know, people are transparent. You're going to ask me what's the percentage of this in in that later, I'm sure. But that's the way it has moved. I had a chance to do a speech in front of our entire company, Corby, and at the Glenlivet. I had to do a retirement words for Alan Winchester. And after 40 years of service as the master distiller, I said, Alan, could you imagine 40 years ago that you now have to tell people about what you're doing in a day on social media to the world? And he says, not really. And I said, it's amazing how that's just changed in a period of 20 years.
Yeah.
And going from no computers to this, it's really changing the dynamics. It's changing how we would talk about alcohol.
Yeah.
Or it used to be the traditional journalists. Mm-hmm. Now we're doing podcasts.
Yeah.
I'm going to be very curious in the next 5 to 10 years how some things will float to the top and how things will go away and how it changes the dynamics of this.
It's interesting how everything's like that was in the early days of the internet, because I remember, I'm old enough, I was in that age gap where I grew up without the computer at school, or you had a computer room but you didn't have internet.
Yeah.
And then I remember having internet for the first time when I was like 22 years old, and then sort of progressed from there. And I talk to a lot of journalists now, like Christine Zismondo and Stephen Beaumont and stuff. Like when they started their careers, it was like, okay, well, how did you put your stories in? It was like, we type them out on a typewriter, then we put them in an envelope, and then we send them into to get them printed.
I know,
and it's only been 10 years really when we've had Facebook. Facebook's only 10 years old. It's incredible that something that we use on a daily basis, like Twitter, Facebook, everything's a decade old.
Yeah, and to answer your question fully, I think it's really information and education and how that's transmitted to our consumer. I think that's the biggest change I've actually seen. I know we've made advances, and there's certain advances I've done in our side of our own distilling stuff, but I mean, it is really done a 180 in terms of how we look at it as a distiller. I still see people reluctant to talk about their products, and I'm more on the transparency side now, because that's what consumers are demanding. They want to know where their food comes from.
Yeah.
Yes, whiskey's a food. Yeah. And I know cocktails are a food, and you're getting into caloric content and things like that now. That more and more information and education is a platform of us recording.
And so you're a bit of a historian when it comes to the distilling side, thanks to Hiram Walker. How nitty gritty did you get really into the old recipes that you dug in out of the archives? And I did. Lucky enough that you're at a distillery that's 100 and something years old,
160. I'll tell you that the longest running brand in Canada is Hiram Walker Special Old. I'll go back, and the oldest book I have for Hiram Walker, I have the recipe to it in the late 1880s, showing he was making old rye whiskey.
Wow.
The recipes changed over and over through the years just because of people's palates change, equipment changes, and things like that. But Hiram Walker Special Old is the oldest running brand in Canada.
Wow.
Most people don't realize that, and they always thought another brand from was his long. No, it's Hiram Walker Special Old, the oldest running brand, and you could see what he was doing at that time period. And I'll often say, from a historical point of view, that Canadian whiskey was the first whiskey category to mandate a minimum aging requirement. Prior to, and that was in 1890. Prior to that, they would make a mash bill, distill it, and sell it. Would have been a lot like moonshine. I think once the government mandated the aging regulations to us, that's where you start seeing blend. Because why would you blend if you knew you were going to distill it and sell it right away? When they forced them to blend and then they had to account for the alcohol and account for the taxes, that's where you start seeing, well, it's a certain percentage of rye and this, and a certain percentage double distilled light whiskey. You can start seeing recipes develop, I think, because of that regulatory change in the 1890s.
Are there any recipes that you found in the archives and you're like, what the hell were they thinking?
No, and one of them is the 909 rule. I think you're familiar with that. I don't know if your audience is. Just to recap it, that in Canadian whiskey, we're allowed to blend in 9.09% wine or 2-year-old other spirit. It's got to be aged spirit. spirit if you're going to put it in there, which is unusual. But the thing is, it allows versatility. And if you go back to Hiram Walker's original recipe book, I could see him putting prune wine and Jamaican rum inside of his recipes. Something that has always been done.
Yeah.
It is a blender's thing that they've always did inside of Canada. I always look at it's one more paint to my painter's palette. I know you make cocktails and you're adding dashes of this and teaspoons of that, or whatever the case may be. This is just one more thing. And today I use it in some brands, some I don't.
And what's the reason behind it? Like, have you got any historical, like...
Well, they always did it.
Yeah.
And I don't know why he chose... He must have been making prune wine.
Yeah.
And it certainly developed some interesting fruity flavors, you can imagine. And I think he owned a Jamaican rum distillery.
Interesting.
And I think he was just trying to blend in nuances. Maybe he was trying to get rid of it. I don't know what the case may be, why they were doing it, but you could see them, and you could see the ball in the recipe where they would bring in cognacs and brandies and the brand Union 52. And that's one I put a 52-year-old Scotch. I could see them putting Scotch in whiskey all the way along. Like in the historical archives of recipes of what they were doing, I thought it was quite ingenious. Who the hell would think to put in a highly peated Scotch, and they were doing it. Wow. And people think it's novel today. No, they were doing it back in the day. And
or sherry or any of the usual suspects that go into whiskey already.
Shawn, unbelievable. I opened up the recipe books, even back in those 1880s. You can see them making caramel coloring. I said, really? They knew how to make caramel coloring? Oh, yeah. You can see them. They have boil so much sugar down to a certain tincture, a certain color, and they were adding caramel coloring even back as early as the 1880s, which blows my mind that they were able to do that.
Well, because me and Soule talk about it a lot, because Soule from Pags, and he, we're lucky enough when we travel, we get to taste a lot of old spirits, and everybody sort of romances, like when you go to Canada and Seattle, everybody romances like 1890 American ryes, or bourbons or something like that, and you're like, well, bourbon wasn't really bourbon until like the 1950s, and before that it was kind of... They did call
it bourbon. You can actually see out of that same recipe book I'm talking about, Hiram Walker was making a bourbon, and that day bourbon meant to be a mixed grain mash bill distilled in a column stove. That's really what the first bourbons. We were making bourbons all the way to the year 2000s.
Wow.
We couldn't call it that, but in my recipe books we call this is the bourbon, and they were always making it. The bourbon was a mixed grain mash bill. And then I guess America took the opportunity to really define it, and great for them. I mean, they commercialized what we think of as bourbon today.
But I laugh at it seems like Canadian whiskey had more roots in actually being good whiskey to a degree than probably some of the American counterparts.
So they're
in that era.
I always say the Canadian whiskey pioneers, and I know you've sat in some of my seminars before, but probably some of the most innovative people, like they learned how to rectify stills. It was a novel technology. Peter Hammond Works invented that in 1846, double distilling, making light whiskey, because they were up and up when they were selling moonshine to people. Yeah. People hate the taste of moonshine, even if it's still today. It's very raw, very rough, very aggressive, and they work their ass off to try to make it lighter and smoother. That's why you see traditional whiskeys like a J.P. Wiser's Deluxe or a Crown Royal or Canadian Club or Gibson's. They tend to be lighter and smoother, but that's what our customers wanted. That's what people wanted back in the 1800s. They didn't want the heavy, spicy, rough. Like, I know it's changing today. People's palates are changing, but people want that light whiskey. And I always say, like, a Deluxe is traditional Canadian whiskey, Wiser's Deluxe.
And I think some people always forget the market, and I talk to reps about this a lot, that while the more geeky stuff, like even Lot 40 to a degree is very popular now, but like you can't beat the entry-level stuff that everybody makes is still the biggest seller. Like us in our little bubble of social, like the social media bubble we're talking about, like we all geek out about like the brand new Wisers that comes out, or the brand new Lot 40 cask strength, but you're like, but you go down to a liquor store and really watch what people buy, still grabbing the JP Wiser, the comfort shelf, and
it's comfort, it's known, and it's very easy, light drinking whiskey, and that's what Canadian whiskey is, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I live in Windsor, Ontario. On a hot day, when I'm sitting beside my pool, I'm going to have a Wiser's Deluxe and ginger ale. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong. Everything's about occasion. As you know, you probably know more still than
So, since you became Master Blender, you've really ramped up the re-release of a lot of things. Like, what was Lot 40 out before you became Master Blender?
I worked on Lot 40 before I became the master blender. I was the blender working for the master blender. I remember working on it in 1998. It failed, to be honest with you, in 1998. The first time we released it, and just consumers weren't ready. People weren't ready for 100% rye whiskeys. The consumers were probably looking more so for single malts, and Irish whiskey was starting to make a little bit of a comeback in the 90s, and it was not the timing. Fast forward to 2012, we re-released it. That's the year I became the master blender. I made a couple of changes to the original recipe. I moved it over into brand new oak, because that's what I did my PhD on, is how wood interacts with whiskey. Over the years, I took out some of the malt. Malt gives you what's called dimethyl sulfide, a vegetable note to your whiskey. So I took out the malt, and the year I did that was the year we won first time the Canadian Whiskey of the Year with that brand. So I think we've done a number of things right, and there's a couple of more tweaks. I'm actually looking at moving it over to a very specific variety of rye.
Okay.
A, for consistency, because rye is a little bit of a challenge when it comes to fermenting and distilling it. And B, I'm looking for more spiciness. So to getting into a very specific hybrid of rye is new territory.
Wow.
And I don't know when the cutoff date will be. Eventually, in a year or two from now, all the Lot 40 will be made using Bracetto rye. It's a rye that's come out of Germany.
Oh, wow.
We get our farmers to contract grow it.
So when you start talking about like different styles of rye, do you bring in sample batches, do a little fermentation, do a little distillation, and sort of see how it reacts?
Initially, when we looked at using Bracetto, the first time, I have a little pilot lab to do that with, and ever since then, we turn the light, let's go for it, and it's just been more consistency getting out of it. I find a lot of ryes out there. There's a lot of misinformation that people, I want a nice dill note in my rye. Dill is not coming from rye.
Yeah.
It's coming from a bacteria infection. And the fermented bacteria will make that dilly note in your whiskey. And a lot of people that have rye whiskeys, I don't know whether they intentionally want it or their fermentation's out of control. So that's another thing I'm kind of working through this new variety of rye. We've now actually seen losing the dill note, which is good. Yeah. That's what I want to do, because I want to make proper rye, spicy whiskey. And, so some of those changes. I mean, don't stand still is my point here.
I've seen how many SKUs you create on a regular basis.
I mean, no, but even if it's just subtle changes, a little bit in the liquid and the juice kind of thing, I'm always trying to make it better.
Little minutiae.
And the day I stand still is the day somebody's going to pass. Ask Polaroid about that. Right? You want to make changes and for the better, and you're always don't be, as soon as you're static, I mean, that's when you're going to be passed. That's my mindset.
Wow, you must be. I'd love to work with that. That's the same way I look at things, and some people think I'm crazy. So,
well, maybe some people think I'm crazy as well, but I think we're offering great quality products. Like we went, for example, the Pike Creek 21 year won the Canadian Whiskey of the Year this year.
That was the Oloroso.
That was the Oloroso, yeah. And I mean, that's changing and playing around with certain things. How does Pike Creek?
I think Pike Creek's underrated as one of your brands. I think as one of the SKU lines. I think I've always loved Pike Creeks. I think I've done the port cask back in the day. I've done the rum cask, and then I haven't done the. I think I did the Oloroso with Colin last year. But I've always thought that the Pike Creek.
It's a fun brand to work with. It's all about finishing.
Underrated brand.
It's all about finishing, and I was a little bit shocked that one won the Canadian Whiskey of the Year. Usually the rye bombs win, but
all the cask strengths 2 years ago,
something like that. But I gotta give kudos to Davin. He changes up the judges every year. And with the set of judges this year, certainly probably gravitated to cask finished whiskeys, and it's a beautiful, beautiful, smooth whiskey. I'd encourage your audience. There's bottles still left out in the marketplace, and we only launched as a rare release 300 cases of it. So good luck finding a bottle. I don't know when this is being aired.
Well, I find also like Canadian whiskey's always bang for your buck, price point wise as well.
Absolutely. Well, 21-year-old Scotch. What are you going to pay for that?
Exactly.
I mean, 21-year-old Pike Creek sits probably around the $80, $90 mark.
Ridiculous. Yeah. I do love how Davin does the Canadian Whiskey Awards, because every year you do sort of see trends from both sides. You see a trend from the distillers about what they put in to be judged, and then you see a trend from the judges about what people are liking that year. Like 2 years ago, I think I did it, and the amount of cask strength whiskeys I had to taste was insane. And as a judge, you have to really pace yourself on days like that, because you're like, you always get set, you always get your glasses out, you line everything up, and then all of a sudden you go, okay, what's this? And you look at the spreadsheet, it's like cask strength, cask strength, cask strength, cask strength, and you're like, oh man, okay, well I'm going to do 5 of these instead of the usual 10. Or you do 10 cream liqueurs one day, or 10 maple flavored liqueurs the next day.
I don't know how you did. I think there was 113 entrants this year, so
you got to pace yourself and then just try and figure out how you're not going to ruin your palate on a daily basis.
I mean, Pike Creek's a brand that I set ourselves up for success. I've got this year I'm going to do Dr. Don's experimental series.
Nice.
In about 2 hours from now.
I was lucky enough that I got to taste your PhD whiskey back in the day.
Back in the day, yeah, it launched its dissertation. Now people scramble to find bottles of it. There's none left. There's absolutely none left. But I'm going to show a Pike Creek finished in a PX cask, which I actually like a little bit better than the Oloroso cask. Yeah, it's a little bit more flavor and more complexity, I find, than PX cask. So,
and the Pike Creek seems to have a nice backbone that just picks up whatever you finish it in. That it just holds it without losing itself.
Beautiful. I agree. I can't agree more with that brand. It's a fun one to play with, and without divulging a lot, I got a whole lineup of things that I finished in. Whether it'll eventually make its way into Pike Creek or some other brand somewhere else, it's fantastic. The other one that surprised me a little bit that did well and got a gold medal this year was the J.P. Weiser's Seven Rebels. It's a BC exclusive only, where we're actually playing with inserts inside a cask. It's like Maker's Mark 46.
Okay, good.
And we work with a barrel company that has the scientific knowledge to make the whiskey give a smoky and a spicy impression by the way they burn the barrels.
Okay.
So we released it. We worked with the Adele at the BCLS. She came to our distillery. I lined up 100 different samples, and she blended their whiskeys. You think this is for the taste profile, British Columbia? We released it Whiskey Week, November 2019. And from what I can tell, the initial, it's been very well received inside the British Columbia market. I mean, it was being served at the awards the other night. People, what is this? This is fantastic. And I want to go. I mean, it's incredible what we can do with whiskeys today and the flavors you can bring in.
So what are you excited about for this year?
We're going to release an interesting one. I'm also going to be tasting that this afternoon as well. Pike Creek 15-year that's been aged in a Canadian wine cask.
Okay.
So we're working with our sister company with Corby. It's Foreign Affairs. They're based out of the Niagara region. They make some fantastic wines. And when a master blender and a winemaker get together, that's dangerous.
Oh, it's just geek city, right?
It is geek city. So Barclay Robinson's the winemaker for there. He came and visited me, and he said, well, Don, why don't we do a swap of barrels? Okay, I said, give me some of your wine barrels, and he gave me some of my whiskey barrels, both some rye and some light whiskey, and he developed a wine with it that's fantastic. Yeah. And then the whiskey, so we're going to launch them together.
Nice.
We're going to launch the 2 pair by pair Father's Day 2020 as a interesting release. So you can buy the bottle of wine, you can buy the bottle of whiskey, and we did a tasting together, which was fantastic. I've never done a tasting with a winemaker before, and it was fantastic. And it's a very, very nice whiskey work. So that's coming up as that as well.
I've always been a huge fan of wine finished whiskeys, and lucky enough here in BC, because we're in BC, like the amount of great wine casks that are floating around that are cheap or free, like it's insane. Yeah. So,
but to have that experiment side by side, it's kind of a cool concept.
Yeah, just to see how the wine reacts to the barrel, because you always have to be concerned like one flavor is going to overpower the other flavor, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I know he did his blending, and I certainly did my blending, and we wanted to make sure it landed in a good place. And from the initial tastings that we've done with it, it's fantastic. I'm very curious how people will receive it this afternoon here. But from the ones we've done before, it's very, very delicious, actually.
And how's your travel schedule? Because I know that since you became Master Blender, your traveling has been non-stop, even with...
Not as bad as our ambassadors, because I can pick and choose. And I do. I mean, I'm trying... We always go back and circle back. Is it worth going to this event? Is it not worth going? Do we hit this event every 5 years, or do we hit it every 3 years? I want to talk to many consumers as I possibly can. I think that's one of the things some blenders and distillers fail at, is they don't talk and listen to their audience.
And I think that's also circles back to what you were saying at the very beginning about like the internet, transparency, social media. Like if people don't see the master blender or someone who can speak like the master blender, then you're sort of losing before you even get started.
Well, and I get to talk to folks like you that are professionals in the industry, and you're telling me the trends you're seeing at bars, you're telling me the trends you're seeing in cocktails. Okay, so I'm processing that information. It's okay, what whiskeys, or I'm in charge of gins and vodkas and rums as well, is what do we need to work on? What's 1 year, 5 year, 10 years look like?
And you got Dave, who's a workhorse.
Yeah, Dave, I mean, he travels more than I do, but certainly every time we get together, or we are having the conversation like you and I are now, I say, well, what trends are you seeing? Where were you at? It even comes down to geographic location. What are they drinking in New York? And Dave's in San Antonio right now. What are they drinking in San Antonio? And I know their taste palates are totally different.
Yeah, it's a good thing to always be changing it up. Well, I think that you've got a busy day ahead. And I think that was kind of an epic episode, so I don't want to keep you too long.
Okay, well, perfect.
And I think we both could talk all day long, but
you see my voice for today. I got 2 master classes and the whole whiskey festival tonight.
I'm always mentally exhausted by the time I finish talking for the day.
It's a pleasure certainly catching up with you. It's been a while.
Yeah, I wish I had more time. I wish you had more time. It would be perfect. But thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Post Shifters. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you're listening, whatever platform you're on, give me a good rating, subscribe, listen along. I'm going to keep going. I really enjoy sitting down with people and learning where they're from, what they did, and how they got to where they were. So if you love it, give me a good 5 stars. If you don't, give me 1 and I'll try harder.